Hi guys, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to talk about mountain photography and a particular aspect of photographing mountains that I find very challenging. And that is twofold. One is the fact that generally I look for depth and diagonals in my photography. And when you're photographing a distant mountain, it can be a little bit flat. So it's very important to bring that feeling of depth into the photograph by manipulating the light and shade in the picture. Now, mountains tend to be a little stark at the best of times, so particularly when you've got snow around, you've got clear, clean whites and making the rest of the rocks and so on look very dark indeed. The other aspect of this, and this wasn't peculiar to this trip, it's peculiar to the lighting conditions, is that a lot of these shots were shot with very high ISO, so a little bit of an issue with noise in the shadows. So it was shot largely during twilight, so blue hour, golden hour, blue hour, and then conversely in the morning, dawn, pre-dawn, post-dawn. So very interesting lighting conditions to shoot in, and a lot of challenges both in the shooting and in the processing. Now, the way that I'm going to approach the video, I think, is to talk about the camera settings first. So we'll go through the pictures, we'll have a quick before and after, and talk about the settings that we used in camera. And then we'll look at the processing of a few of these pictures, or a couple of these pictures. I don't suppose we've got the patience to sit through the whole collection of 8 photographs. I'm going to try and keep this quite contained and short. Okay, let's get into it. So camera settings, what is absolutely key in this is not to overexpose anything. So we've got some pictures here which have got very bright elements like the sun, which you can't really avoid overexposing, but you can make it manageable. So always in these circumstances, check your histogram, make sure that you're not overexposing. You can bring back detail from the dark much easier than you can bring back detail from the light. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is to run these through DxOPureRAW in order to get rid of any noise. So we might have noise lurking in the shadows typically. These have been shot in very low light conditions, and the exposure is determined by the brightness of the moon here. In this particular picture, different parameters for different pictures, but it's likely that there's noise lurking in those shadows. So we select them all, we go File, go Plug in Extras, Preview and Process for DxOPureRAW 5. We're going to choose Deep Prime. We're going to leave the presets as they are, so 50 luminance, minus 49 force details. We're going to keep the existing lens sharpness optimization, get rid of any vignetting, get rid of any chromatic aberration, and correct any lens distortions, keeping it maximum rectangle. In the output dialog, we're going to choose TIFF, and we're going to put them in the original folder in the Pure Raw processed folder. And we're going to keep the processing method, so let's go with that. Okay, so this is the raw file after having been treated in Pure Raw. So what we need to do first here is to establish a crop, and the way that I'm going to do this is because I can't see anything in the picture because it's so dark. We're going to brighten this up to a hideous degree, but just so I can get a view of what's available in the picture. We'll lift these shadows. Okay, and then I'm going to go for my 16:9 crop, and I'm going to bring this in a little bit. And I use this window up here as I find personally it gives me a better view of the sort of graphic features of the photograph. So I would come in a little bit because we want it to be framed by the tree, gives it some foreground, the sun roughly in the centre. Okay, we've got a little bit of a distracting thing going on up in the top corner. What happens if we take that up? That's probably... I think we'll go with that as the crop, so I might adjust that later, but let's go with that. Okay, now we take it back down again and start to get serious about how we want this picture to look. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to kill off the highlights to get a nice crisp outline of the sun, and then raise the exposure just gently until that starts to blur out. But okay, so we don't want it to look as though the hill's on fire here, as dramatic as that might be. So we'll just back off a little bit there, and then raise our shadows a little bit to get some light into the rest of the picture here. Okay. Now, if I look closely at this, I can see that I've got some slightly distracting reflections going in there. I don't think that's lens flare, but I think it's sunlight bouncing off something there, and it's just a little small irritant. So we'll quickly go into Photoshop to get rid of these. I find the Photoshop tool is better than the Lightroom tool at doing this. So I'm going to choose my edit in Adobe Photoshop, edit a copy of, so we're bringing the Lightroom adjustments that we've made so far across. Take this up to 100%, and I see there's a bird flying across there. I select my spot healing brush, take that out. There's no reason to take that out other than the fact that it's a speck and it's ever so slightly distracting. And now at 100% we can see that we've got good definition on these trees. It's these that need to come out. There's a couple of these. And because it's so dark, I'm not that worried about the detail of what's in the scene here, because it's in silhouette and I'm not going to show it. So what's important in this picture is the outline of the trees. Okay, I think that's just about done it. So let's save that. And that will show up back in Lightroom in a second. There we go. And there we have it. Look closely at that. That's the one we want. Okay, only thing to remain now is I think this light patch of sky actually takes slightly away from it. So I'm going to put in a linear gradient here, and we're just going to dampen that down a little bit. Until that no longer grabs the eye quite as much. That's probably more like it. That'll do. Okay, so that I think is as far as we can really go. The problem here, of course, is that these shadows are so dark. I think for me, this is a sort of like an impressionist kind of thing. It's a sunset. We don't need to have 100% sort of photo perfection here. We need to give the impression of the sun going down and the drama in the sky, and I'm quite happy with that as is. So I think I'm going to leave this one here. Okay, for the second picture, we've got different challenges in this picture. We've still got a dark foreground, but we've got the moon and the sky here, which we need to preserve, and we need to bring some interest back into these peaks. You can see the sun's just catching the peaks here, so we want to transform this picture into something much more accurately, if you like, of a depiction of a sort of pre-dawn photograph. Okay, so again, first thing I'm going to do is the crop. So the same method as before, increase the light so I can see what I've got in the foreground. And I think I'll probably go for around the bottom of this tree. So again, I'm going to go with 16:9 in this. I'm going to put the and I think we'll have that just about there. I think that's about right. So we'll take that crop, we'll restore the exposure to what it was. Okay, and now there's a couple of features of Lightroom that I wanted to play around with, and this is a good opportunity, I think. So let's have a look at the masks. So we've got a category here called landscape, and this will detect the elements. Okay, so we've got some pre-cooked masks here. So if we choose the sky, create a mask, this shows me the settings in that mask, and I just want to take that down a little bit until it starts to look more like the dawn that I remember. Okay, now we're going to create another mask. And again, we're going to, I think this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the, let's see what the options are for select. So we've got an option for mountains, but that's arguably going too far. I don't necessarily want to do this like that. So I'm going to reverse out of that. I'm going to go with the select object here. Now this is quite neat because what the select object does is detect edges, and it doesn't actually have to be a coherent object. So I'm just going to go and rely on it to pick up the white in this. Okay, then there you go, it's created a perfect mask, perfect edges on the sky. And this one, we want to actually take it up, but not so much that it looks artificial. We want to just bring it to approximately there, I think, so it still looks realistic. Give it a bit of contrast to bring those blacks out. Make this more stark, and we've now got a little bit overflowing there, so I don't want this to be necessarily as bright as the rest of the mountains. I know it would be, but I think it looked better if it's slightly muted. So again, we'll go into this, reduce the size of that brush, just take it over that bit there. See, it's selected that quite nicely. And we'll just bring that up, just a suggestion. So 0.55 on that one, 0.64 on the other one. It's a small difference, but it's one that I think is worth making. Okay, and now we want to feed a little bit of light into these areas. So there's a couple of different ways we can do this. Again, we can go in our select landscape one and choose vegetation. Now the problem with that is it's also chosen a whole lot of stuff on the mountain which we don't want it to select. So I'm going to come out of that and cancel away from that. I'm going to come back, and I think we'll try this with a linear gradient. So if we bring this up here, and let's just have a look and see what's happening. Now for me that is okay, that's about the level of detail that I want in here. This is pre-dawn, so it would be unrealistic to take this up to there, but that's quite okay. That's just bringing a suggestion of light into it, and I'll just take that a little bit further up. Okay, and I think that's about where we want to be. Take that down a little bit. It's just really showing that there is something there. Lift those shadows a touch. Okay, and the last thing I want to do here is come back to the sky, or come back to the colours in that sky. I'm going to take the temperature down a little bit. And let's have a look at the actual colours. So we go to the colour mixer. Our blue here. Give it a little bit more saturation. And I think take the luminance down a little bit, perhaps quite as much as that. I think round about there. Let's have a look at the hue. Make that ever so slightly purpley. There's one. And I think returning to these shadows here, just a smidge, and I think that's fine. I think that's perfectly nice. Okay, so there's a couple of other little tweaks that I'd like to do with this, and that is come down to calibration and just let's get that sky down there a little bit. We've got a nice amount of there we go, just a hint of blue in there, and now I think we can lift this foreground a little bit more. Okay, and I just want to raise this foreground a little bit more now, because we've got the mountains looking good, the sky's looking good. Let me just tweak that, and I'm going to do that with a brush. So bring back my thing, make a new mask, brush, and I just want to go over this area there, and and raise that just a little bit, and I think that's looking quite good. Okay, good. So we'll go, I think, with that one. That looks good to me. We've got a nice clear moon. We've got the light coming through on the mountains, and this isn't strictly realistic, but what it does do is give some depth to the picture. So we've got a layer here, we've got a layer here, and of course we've got the very distant moon, and this is silhouette as it should be. So I'm again happy with that, so I'm going to leave that at that. So let's have a comparison, see what this looks like before. So before, after, before, after. Okay, so looking at this, I would dial back a little bit on the tree here. So let's just go in there, choose that mask, and we can just back off the effect of that mask a little bit. Alright, so come back here, before, after, before, after, before, after. Good. I think that's a perfectly good result. There's my after. Fantastic. Okay, so that's the two photographs done, sort of opposite ends of the spectrum, but actually similar challenges when it boils down to it. And a lot of this is about how you deal with shadow and light and balance your inputs so that the software, the camera and everything else can cope with it, and you get as much information as you can. Now, as you can see from the display behind me, I am the world's most inveterate tweaker and fiddler of editing, and I have taken this picture on another little bit further. What I did was I simply made it into a more panoramic style of crop, brought some of the sky down, tweaked the colour of the sky, and that's enabled me to lift the trees at the front ever so slightly, and I think that makes for a slightly more balanced picture. I've no doubt that I will go back and do even more work on this again. So one thing I did want to point out in this video is that these same edits could just as easily have been done in DxOPureRAW or in Affinity Photo. It would have taken slightly longer. Some of the new, dare I say it, AI-assisted selection tools in Lightroom are very effective. Anyway, if you're still with me, thanks for listening so far, guys. So hopefully we'll see you next week, and if you've enjoyed the video, found it useful, do subscribe to the channel, or give us a like down below if you're already subscribed. See you next week, guys. Thanks very much.